Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 30 are killed while sleeping in their cars in northeastern Nigeria. Dozens of women and children were also kidnapped. Witnesses say that jihadists are behind the attack, although no one's yet claimed responsibility. Also, a French appeal court fines Teodorin Obiang, Equatorial Guinea's vice president, 30 million euros for plundering state coffers to pay for fast cars and mansions in France. Anti-corruption campaigners say it is a blow for justice. Also, 10 months after the fall of Omar al-Bashir, the Sudanese city of Atbara has changed immensely. We hear from our correspondents on the ground who go to the place where the first bread protest began in 2018, setting the ball rolling for the revolution that eventually toppled Omar al-Bashir last April. But first, at least 30 people have been killed and dozens of women and children kidnapped in Borno state in northeastern Nigeria. Militants in trucks targeted drivers sleeping in their cars on a major highway near the village of Auno. Sam Olokoya tells us more.
The military has a tradition of closing this particular highway at night or in the evenings, and this normally leaves so many vehicles, kilometers of vehicles stranded on this highway. So it definitely didn't come as a surprise that this attack happened. They were like a sitting target for people who wanted to attack, and these people came in trucks and guns and attacked those who are in their vehicles, also attacked the villages, burned some vehicles, and took so many people, very many people away.
Do you have any idea why they would have taken the women and children?
Well, we've seen this over time, especially in that part of northeast Nigeria where these militants operate. Besides killing, they have a tradition of abducting people in this particular part of northeast Nigeria. You remember the case of the schoolgirls in Dapchi. It's within the same area. So we've seen this repeated over and over again that the militants not only kill, but they also take women and children away. They could use them as sex slaves. They could use them to bargain for ransom. And they could execute them just to show that they are still very much relevant.
Now, bearing in mind, no one's yet actually claimed responsibility for the attack. The suspicion is that it is jihadists behind it. Witnesses say that it is jihadists, but why are they so sure? And also, what does that say about the government's current efforts to kind of contain the Boko Haram insurgency?
Well, evidence clearly points to one of the key jihadist groups, and that's the ISWAP. In the past weeks, this group has actually kidnapped people in this area and actually claimed responsibility for it. A key of this is the case of a university student, that we saw a child of about 10 years execute on video. I mean, it was the same case. I mean, it was within the same area, and this group actually claimed responsibility for it. A number of people that were abducted on this road, ISWAP has claimed responsibility for this abduction. So suspicion will definitely fall on them. They are the ones that are active in this area. They are the ones that have claimed responsibility for incidents like this. Actually, this incident comes at the time the Nigerian populace has raised issues about the handling of this Boko Haram insurgency. They say the handling has more or less failed, and that this has happened is quite a serious issue, because this road is so important. It links Maiduguri to the rest of the country, and effectively we could see a situation of blockade.
Samuel Okoye there for us in Abuja. Now, the son of Equatorial Guinea's president was given a 30 million euro fine in a Paris court on Monday for plundering from state coffers to pay for a luxury lifestyle. Nicolas Chemin has more.
Señores, este señor es un delincuente, igual que su amo, Teodorin Obiang.
Equatorial Guinea's ambassador was heckled by opposition supporters. He came to the Paris court unlike his country's vice president, Teodorin Obiang. On Monday, Obiang was handed a €30 million fine on top of a suspended jail term and the confiscation of his assets for embezzling public funds. His lawyer did not respond to our calls. Defense lawyers called it an historic verdict.
This
is an important step. It's a major signal to those who believe in impunity and who want to organize and maintain a system to steal public funds in Africa and elsewhere.
Obiang is the son of Equatorial Guinea's president. He could still lodge a final challenge to France's highest court. Half the population of his country lives below the poverty line. Obiang was accused of having used public funds to buy, among other things, a mansion in one of Paris's most expensive districts. He has lodged an appeal with the International Court of Justice, arguing the mansion is a diplomatic building and should not be seized. Its fate will be decided by the International Court. Since the trial started, Obiang, who's known for his lavish lifestyle, regularly posted pictures of himself on yachts and in front of luxury cars.
Well, as is often the case, stability in the bloc was a major issue at the African Union summit as it wrapped up in Addis Ababa on Monday. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa took over as AU chair on Sunday. He says that he wants to focus on the conflicts in Libya and South Sudan during his tenure. But they are not the only concerns. 2019 was the deadliest year for civilians in Mali since its 2012 crisis. Whilst at the AU summit, Mali's president admitted to France 24 that in a bid to tackle deepening conflict, his government has had contact with jihadist insurgents, despite them having rejected the option in the past.
This isn't being done on a whim. We're still waiting for the first reactions. Through national dialogue, we're not lying about that. We're going to try and do what the people want, like with the Jirga in Afghanistan, to put it into practice. And we're trying to do it without being naive. We're not gullible. We'll continue with our work, with our duty, but we want to make sure that we will no longer be stubborn about things, stuck or obtuse.
Meanwhile, Human Rights Watch has released a new report warning of the growing threat of armed groups in Mali. Take a look.
One of the deadliest attacks in Mali's recent history happened in March of last year. Armed men massacred 150 civilians in the village of Ogasagu for their perceived support of armed Islamists. Central Mali was the epicenter of such violence in 2019, a year that saw the deaths of 456 civilians. In a 90-page report documenting the attacks, the group Human Rights Watch said ethnic militias massacred people in their villages, gunned them down as they fled, pulling men from public transportation, executed based on their ethnicity. Many people unable to escape armed attacks were burned alive in their homes, while others were blown up by explosive devices. The violence in central Mali has increased steadily since 2015, when groups linked to al-Qaeda escalated attacks on army and police posts, as well as civilian targets. The bloodshed continues today, despite the presence of French, regional, and UN forces.
It's no longer just northern Mali, but the center of the country and the regions bordering Niger and Burkina Faso, which are now affected by various kinds of overlapping conflict. And it's the kind that lasts. We're entering a protracted conflict that brings with it the humanitarian consequences of displacement and of redisplacement of the civilian population.
In 2019, more than 85,000 civilians fled their homes, according to Human Rights Watch. The group is calling on Mali's government to ramp up investigations and prosecutions against ethnic militias responsible for the violence.
10 months after the fall of Omar al-Bashir, the Sudanese city of Atbara has changed immensely. It was where the first bread protests began in 2018 that set the ball rolling for the revolution that eventually toppled al-Bashir last April. France 24 Elodie Cousin tells us more.
Namareg was one of the first to take to the streets. It was here, in the market, that students protested after the price of bread tripled at their university cafeteria.
1 year ago, people were suffering from the economic crisis caused by the policies of the previous regime. This prevented us from having enough money to have a normal life. And because the citizens of Atbara are politically engaged, we rebelled and brought about the changes that have made us so proud today.
The city has been visibly changed. The walls are covered by the murals of the revolution. And young people no longer keep their political ideas to themselves. Namareg joins friends to celebrate the memory of the martyrs of the protests. They're still fighting to bring about their ultimate demand, democracy.
The situation is still not satisfactory. It's not changing enough. We have no other option than to continue the fight. The Sudanese should push the current regime and its military members to achieve the goals of the revolution.
Atbara is known for its powerful labor unions, including the railway union, which had been marginalized by al-Bashir. He feared that the resistance would come from the city. This man oversees Atbara's health services. Everything is different for him since the dictator's fall.
We are now working together in harmony. There is a good coordination with Khartoum. In 20 years of service, I have never seen this. For example, for all the information we ask for, we get a response.
The fall of al-Bashir has given Atbara a taste of freedom, but the transition is far from over. And for now, the military still sits at the head of the Sovereign Transitional Council.
And finally, Miss Universe received a stellar welcome upon touching down in her homeland of South Africa. She flew in from New York for the first time since winning last December. So Zibini Tunzi's victory meant the world to her countrymen and women. As a relatively rare black face in the ranks of the victorious in an international beauty contest, she says that she wants to tell the story of South African women and children. She's due to be the guest of President Cyril Ramaphosa at the State of the Nation address on Thursday. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Special event.
France 24 is here on the ground in New Hampshire for the primary. Follow our live coverage. The candidates who are polling best right now are the same ones who came out top in Iowa. Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator, and former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He's positioned himself as the moderate alternative to the Democratic Socialist. How will the other candidates do? They're all hoping for a boost here in New Hampshire. Follow our coverage on France 24.
Watch events unfold live on France 24 and France24.com.